Welcome in, everybody. Ryan here from the TIYF Podcast. This is the Cobra Corner. You know, it's only been about 6 weeks since the end of the NFL season and the Super Bowl. Probably around, 8 weeks, 8, 9, 10 weeks since the fantasy football season ended. But you know what? It's never too early to get started in fantasy football rankings, and that's why we're here at the Cobra Corner, episode number 1. We're going to cover picks 1 through 12, or really rankings 1 through 12. I'm going to talk about a little bit of my drafting strategy inside of this episode. We're going to go over some important things in the ways that I draft, and really talk about all things fantasy football within this episode with regards to ranks 1 through 12. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. All right, so let's give these rankings some context. All of the rankings that I'm going to give you in this video today are going to be based off of half-point PPR scoring, based off a 12-team league. Within that league, 1 QB, 2 RBs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. Emphasis on reliability, emphasis on points per game, emphasis on positional advantage. One thing I'll tell you guys, these rankings that I'm about to give you are really going to be tailored to a lot of home leagues that use standard scoring from like ESPN or Yahoo, things like that, half-point PPR. A lot of times leagues for home leagues are going to be like 10, 12 teams, usually 12, maybe 14 sometimes. But I'm telling you what the rankings you're going to see here, and I look at a lot of fantasy stuff across the internet. These rankings are specifically my unique rankings. There's going to be some variation for sure when I go through this, and I think you'll be surprised by the time we get to the end of the rankings, some of the players that I have in there. When I tend to draft, I look for positional reliability is probably the very first and foremost thing. When I'm going through a draft, the probably by far the most important picks in your draft are going to be round 1 and round 2. And that kind of goes without saying, but it's really easier said than done to hit those picks. So we have to do a lot of research. We got to watch videos like this where we look at rankings and we look at perspectives and think about the kind of players that we're going to draft and how exactly we're going to construct our team for success. So I put heavy emphasis on reliability. It's a big deal, and I'm going to talk about it a lot throughout this video. Points per game, I think, is something that is often overlooked. We don't typically look at points per game, but it's one, at least for myself, it's one of the key indicators as to how reliable a player is going to be for you, or how reliable that player is going to be within your lineup or your team that you put out every week. So that's something that I look at. And then, emphasis on positional advantage. So that's getting an advantage over your league mates. Those are getting, having an advantage at a position is crucial if you want to win a lot of fantasy football games. So let's talk about it. Number 1. All right, number 1 ranking Christian McCaffrey. I think you could go a couple different ways at number 1. If you like wide receivers, you want to go Justin Jefferson, I think that's totally viable. For my personal ranking, I'm going with Christian McCaffrey. I think in a lot of home leagues, a lot of like really common leagues, running back is still by far the most important position in fantasy football. I think that running back right now is under a bit of a renaissance, or maybe not a renaissance, but more of a decline. Things are changing for running backs. There are very few bell cow running backs nowadays, and it's maybe debatable that Christian McCaffrey might not be a bell cow anymore, quite the way they used to be with Carolina, but I think he is still just as potent, and within that San Francisco 49er offense, there can be extremely potent scoring machine. And so that is why I have Christian McCaffrey as number 1. Going through some of my bullet points here, 313 points, 0.9 points on the season. I'll be honest, when you're in round 1, anytime you have a chance to get a player that can go north of 300 fantasy points per game, you have to look at it. Those kind of players should be the foundation of your fantasy team, especially when you're starting off in round 1. So I have Christian McCaffrey here. He averaged 18.5 points per game. I know he missed a game. He had one game where he was short on snaps, and then I think he probably missed a game too. So, overall, pretty good fantasy season from him. Didn't crest that 20 point per game mark that I usually like to see, but got very, very close to it, and I think he'll get back to that again this next season. Averaged about 110 total yards per game, had 14 touchdowns. There is, a little bit of a question mark when we're going to talk about QB for the 49ers going into the next season. Is it Brock Purdy? Is it Trey Lance? Is it Sam Darnold? We don't know. But honestly, it's a Kyle Shanahan offense with Christian McCaffrey, so it doesn't bother me too much. I'm still willing to take Christian McCaffrey number 1 overall. And he's by far, the unquestioned number 1 option at running back for the 49ers. So if you get lucky enough to get the number 1 pick, Christian McCaffrey's there. Do not feel any hesitation taking him as number 1. Number 2. All right, at number 2, we have Justin Jefferson. What can I say about Justin Jefferson? Probably a lot. 2022 scoring 304.7 fantasy points. This is half-point PPR that we're talking about. The guy, is the unquestioned wide receiver 1 right now. Just from a consistency standpoint, the potency of the Vikings offense, you have a good quarterback with Kirk Cousins. I would not argue with you if you took Justin Jefferson number 1 overall. I really wouldn't. I think that if you take a player Justin Jefferson's caliber on your team, you are getting off to a very good start in your fantasy football season for next year. Going down the rest of the bullet points, 17.9 points per game. Pretty good. I'll be honest, when I'm in my draft, I'm trying to look for somebody that can go north of 20 points per game. I know that Justin Jefferson throughout the season had a couple of stinker games, especially on championship week. He actually had a really bad game that week. Which is a little bit unfortunate, but that does not scare me off. I still think that he can absolutely go above that 20-point per game mark. He is one of the only receivers in the NFL that can actually get to the NFL receiving record. I know that him and Kirk Cousins and the Vikings are trying to push for that 2,000-yard receiving record. There's no doubt in my mind that they actually could do it in 2023. So you want a player like that. And it's actually, to me, it's music to my ears to hear a player going for 2,000 receiving yards. By all means, I hope he is on my fantasy team when he does that. So, going through the rest of the numbers, 106.4 receiving yards per game. Definitely very good. Had 9 touchdowns. I would hope to see that bump up into double digits this next season. Could make a case be number 1 overall in fantasy. Like I said, if you went this route, would not argue with that. Great floor with an unbelievably high ceiling. So one of the biggest draws to Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, is quite frequently he can have a game with a week-winning performance where he goes over 30 points per game at the position. And those games are extremely valuable, especially in certain key situations where you need, a big explosion game from a player to keep you in it. You can get that from Justin Jefferson, and honestly, it happens quite often. So no regrets. You get Justin Jefferson at number 2 or number 1. I think you did very well, and you're off to a great start for fantasy. Number 3. All right, pick number 3. We have Jamaar Chase. I will be honest, I did not think I'd have Jamaar Chase this high up on my list, but here we are. He is number 3. Let me put it to you this way. Jamaar Chase has the potential to be just as good as Justin Jefferson, if not better. We know they played together at LSU, and when they both played together at LSU, Jamaar Chase was actually the alpha. So, look, he's going into his 3rd season. He has an all-pro quarterback with Joe Burrow. I think there is a very, very good chance in the near future that Jamaar Chase is going to have a 20-point per game plus kind of season, and I think it's going to happen this next season here in 2023. He averaged 16.6 points per game last season for a total of 198.9. I know he missed quite a few games, the hip injury. Averaged 87.2 receiving yards per game, had 9 touchdowns. Could be the wide receiver 1 in 2024 or 2023, really, for that matter. He's a generational talent. Has 20-point per game potential, and that's what I mean. When we're looking to start our team off in the draft and we have an early pick like this, you have to hit. And you're looking for players that are going to give you massive positional advantages, and Jamaar Chase is one of those guys. Anytime you're able to get a player that can go north of 20 points per game that is not a quarterback is such a massive boon for your team. You have to take that shot, and I believe Jamaar Chase absolutely has that potential. So no doubt about it. If you're at pick 3, Jamaar Chase is there. Don't hesitate. I think he's an awesome pick and a great way to start your fantasy league. Number 4. All right, pick number 4. A little bit of controversy here. I have Travis Kelce at number 4. I think it's just undeniable how good or how great, not even good, but how great Travis Kelce is as a tight end and how great he is as a fantasy asset on your fantasy football team. He finished the season with 261.3 fantasy points, and we're talking about half PPR. That is amazing for a tight end. Averaged 15.4 points per game, 78.7 yards per game, had 12 touchdowns. Bullet point here, biggest positional advantage in fantasy football, and that goes without question. It is not even close. He had 90 more points scored than the tight end 2, which was Hawkinson. That's massive. 90 points over the season. I mean, there's tons of tight ends that never even reach 90 points in a season, which is just crazy. So I have Travis Kelce here at number 4. I know the points per game is not very high, but that massive positional advantage is definitely something you want to keep an eye on and something that really could propel your fantasy team into the season and into the playoffs and potentially a championship. I actually drafted Kelce on my own team last season in the second round. I think there's no way he makes it to the second round this year. I think if you're a sharp drafter and you're looking to build out your team and build those positional advantage into your lineup every week, Travis Kelce is a fantastic way to start your fantasy season. So take a look. I know there's some age concerns. He's going to be 34, I think, this season, which is getting up there, but I'm not worried about it. What we saw into the playoffs, into the Super Bowl, he's still elite. He's not necessarily blowing past people with elite speed. He never has. He's always been just a high IQ football player that's able to get into excellent positioning in space, able to find the gaps. And then, we can't forget he has a generational talent at quarterback too with Patrick Mahomes. And so as long as Travis Kelce is going to play, as long as he has Patrick Mahomes throwing to him, and as long as he's able to get out, go up against linebackers and find gaps in the zone coverage, give me Travis Kelce all day. He's going to be great. Again, I don't know necessarily if he's going to be 261 points again next season, but I have no doubts he's going to go north of 200 easily and probably be the tight end 1 again for probably the 7th time. So if you're there, Travis Kelce, I know it's not super popular pick, but I would take him as low as pick number 4. Number 5. All right, pick number 5. Here we go. Cooper Kupp. I'll be honest, I watch a lot of fantasy football content on YouTube. I listen on Apple Podcasts, things like that. We have our own fantasy football podcast with TIYF. Cooper Kupp is somebody that does not get talked about nearly enough. I think we might have all forgot that in 2021 he was the Triple Crown winner. 1,900 yards receiving, led the league in touchdowns, receptions. Like, the guy is an absolute beast. I think the reason why we forget is because look at the scoring, 163.9 points on the season. He only played about half the season, had a bye week in there. But points per game, 20.3 points per game in half-point PPR. Now, I put an asterisk next to that because the game that he got injured, he only had, I think, like maybe 4 or 5 points. So that one game really drug down his actual point per game average through the season. So if you take that one game out, he was averaging over 20 points per game. He was actually the only wide receiver to average 20 points per game on the season to that point before he got injured. He, the reason why I have him ranked so high is because Matt Stafford is coming back for another season, and so is Sean McVay. They're going to give it another run at a Super Bowl. And I think as long as Stafford and McVay are there, give me Cooper Kupp. You got a healthy Cooper Kupp, healthy Matt Stafford, Sean McVay. It would not shock me at all if Cooper Kupp finishes the wide receiver 1 this next season. As long as everybody is healthy and they have a good season, Cooper Kupp at number 5 to me is a no-brainer. I think that when you're looking to construct your roster and you're looking for players that are going to get you a good floor game, at minimum a floor game, but has the potential to go over 20 points on the week, Cooper Kupp is that guy. He's probably going to get you anywhere from 8 to 12 receptions a game, probably get you 100 yards and might catch a touchdown or 2. So can't argue with this, really. This is, like I said, it's my own custom rankings. If I was in a draft with you and I'm at pick number 5, Cooper Kupp's there, I would take him. Number 6. Okay, now we're at number 6. We have Austin Ekeler. So big fat asterisk next to this pick. Or ranking. So Austin Ekeler, before I start talking about all the stats and everything, he was the RB1. He finished the RB1 in the season with 319.2 fantasy points. But before I get any further, this ranking 100% depends on where Austin Ekeler is going to play next season. If he's with the LA Chargers, then he's going to be squarely in the first round rankings for myself. If not, if he goes somewhere else, more than likely he'll probably fall to the back of the first, early second round would be my guess. Just depends on where he lands. If he goes now, I know this probably won't happen, but if he ended up in like Cincinnati, then I'd probably keep him as a first round pick easily. So with that, let's just assume that he's going to stay with the Chargers. He had 319 points scored last season. That goes good for 18.8 points per game, 98.1 total yards per game, 18 touchdowns, which is a massive number. Good for him. Only RB to have over 100 receptions last season. And then, like I said, the team in question needs to stay in LA to maintain the ranking. So, that's a big, big deal. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. But if he does stay in LA, which hopefully is best for all parties, you're going to have yourself a solid running back to start with at pick number 6 with Austin Ekeler. Number 7. All right, pick number 7, and back to the wide receiver well, Tyreek Hill, number 7. So Tyreek Hill is an interesting case. I think a lot of people slept on him going into the 2022 season. I know myself, I really didn't pay too much attention to Tyreek Hill. He was going a lot in the mid-second to early third round, and a lot of the drafts that I was attending. And man, what a show. This guy came out and put up some massive numbers, 281.7 points for the season, good for 16.6 points per game, 100.6 receiving yards per game, had 10 touchdowns. The biggest draw about Tyreek Hill is the potential week winning performances every week. So we saw it quite a few times where this guy easily go over 30 points in a single game and win you the week. So if you're drafting Tyreek Hill, that's generally what you're looking for. You're looking for those week winning performances. But I'll give him credit. He overall, even without the week winning performances, overall was a lot more consistent than he was in the previous season with Kansas City. So good for him. Looks like Tua is coming back. They're going to have continuity within the offense. I would expect Tyreek Hill to have a great season for 2023. And actually, my last bullet point could actually be better for 2023, if we're all being honest here. He was magnificent, and just another year in the system could be even better. Number 8. All right, pick number 8. Here we are, Jonathan Taylor. We are going back to running back. This is only the third running back here in my round 1 rankings. But Jonathan Taylor, I feel like he's the forgotten guy, or maybe he's not forgotten, or he's maybe just been cast aside because he was like a consensus number 1 pick for last season and really, demolished everybody's team that he was on. So I'm going back. I'm not going to be afraid. If I have a chance to take Jonathan Taylor here at pick number 8, or later even, which you probably might be able to get him even later, I'm absolutely going to smash that submit button on Jonathan Taylor. He only had 132.4 points in 2022, which is terrible. Missed a lot of that time with injury. Averaged 12 points per game. Averaged 90.2 total yards per game for only 4 touchdowns. Was the RB1 overall in 2021. One of the last remaining running backs with 20 point per game potential. That's the big thing there, and that's the reason why I have him at number 8. I think there is a good chance that if Jonathan Taylor is healthy going into next season and stays healthy for the season, that they can get that O-line back together. Depending on what they do at quarterback, if they go with Lamar Jackson or they get some other quarterback that is even just halfway decent, Jonathan Taylor could have another bang-out season. He has gone over 20 points per game once in 2021. He could absolutely do it again. He's still young. I think he's only 24, maybe going on 25. There's still plenty of tread left on that tire. And I would urge you, if you're in this position where you're in the back half of the first round, don't be scared. Like, you could take Jonathan Taylor. Is it a bit of a risk? Sure. I think all of these players are a risk, but you got to be, at this point in the draft, we're looking for the consistency, but we're also looking for that potential upside, because there's a reason why Jonathan Taylor is this far in the draft. So if I'm here at number 8, I have no hesitation. I'll take Jonathan Taylor. I'll risk it. maybe there is a little bit more risk, but we know what the potential is. And if he is healthy, you're going to have, a guy that really could be potentially the RB1 on the season again, this coming season, if everything works out right. Number 9. All right, for pick number 9, we're going back to the running back well with Saquon Barkley. It was really great to see Saquon back this season, and really healthy for most of it. I know he had a couple dings, but he looked really great. Really burst onto the scene the first half of the season, and really made a lot of people look like fools for taking him so late, or not taking him, but for passing on him. It's Saquon, man. I just think with another season under Brian Daboll, he has a chance to be extremely good again. For 2022, he scored 255.5 points, good for 16 points per game, 103.1 total yards per game with 10 touchdowns. I think he has a chance to improve on that 16 points per game. I think he can get somewhere around 18 points a game with another year under Brian Daboll. But the biggest thing here, and the reason why I have him at number 9, he's one of the few remaining bell cow backs in the NFL. And I think the talent is still elite. He's not that old. And with another year in the system, I think he can be elite again. And so, it's so hard to find bell cow backs in the NFL nowadays, especially for fantasy. Take a shot on Saquon. I think he'll be all right, especially on the back half of the first round. Number 10. Okay, here we are, pick number 10. So this is where my rankings are going to really start to deviate from a lot of stuff that you're going to see on YouTube and everywhere else. I'm talking, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm really geared towards people that play in home fantasy leagues and probably a little bit more normal people. If you're in a home fantasy league that is competitive, I think the end of the first round is actually the time when you should start to consider a quarterback. What we have seen over the last few years is a massive shift towards really high-end elite quarterbacks that are game changers and really give you massive positional advantage at the quarterback position in fantasy. Josh Allen still is number 1 on that list for myself. He finished the season with 412.2 points, averaged 25.8 points per game, 267.7 passing yards per game, 35 touchdowns, probably the most consistent QB in fantasy. I have to go back and check on this, but I don't think he had a single game under 20 fantasy points the entire season for 2022. I got to check that. If he did, he maybe had like 1. By far and away, the most consistent quarterback, period. And if you're in the late first round, and you're looking at guys in this range, you're looking at guys like probably Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, some other running backs in there, Ken Walker, receivers, there's Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, guys like that. They're all fine and good, but they don't have huge positional advantages like the earlier guys do, like a Jamaar Chase or a Justin Jefferson or a Cooper Kupp. Those guys have true positional advantage. And by positional advantage, I'm talking like 3, 4, 5 points per game difference compared to the next tier under them. But who does have a positional advantage? Absolutely Josh Allen. Josh Allen compared to a tier 2 quarterback, and by tier 2, I'm talking about a guy like Justin Herbert right now. I can't really say Lamar Jackson. Yeah, he really didn't play much of the season, but like a Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins or any of those later quarterbacks, we're talking about a 5, 6, 7 point per game difference in scoring, which is absolutely massive when you're talking about fantasy football, especially in a game of fantasy football where a lot of times your scoring comes down to 1, 2, 3 points in a week. That positional advantage is massive. So call me crazy and comment, please do. Let me know your feedback, but I think Josh Allen is worth a back end of the first round pick at number 10. Number 11. All right, and at pick 11, why stop at Josh Allen? Let's go with Patrick Mahomes. Why not? Patrick Mahomes, dude, 428.9 points on the season. I would imagine in most leagues it finished as the QB1, averaged 25.2 points per game, 308.8 passing yards per game with 41 touchdowns. Just super consistent with potential to go over 40 points in a single game. Huge positional advantage compared to tier 2 quarterbacks, just like Josh Allen. Like I said, if you have a Patrick Mahomes on your team, more weeks than not, you're going to have a massive advantage in scoring, because a lot of times your opponent is going to put like a Dak Prescott, a Kirk Cousins, or, name that quarterback, probably like a Trevor Lawrence or somebody else. And you're going to easily have like a 5-point per game advantage over them. Unless your opponent has Josh Allen, then it's probably a tie. But like I said, I know it sounds crazy, but I think if you're looking to build a team that is consistent, can consistently go over the 100-point mark in a week, having a quarterback like Mahomes gets you a quarter of the way there. So I think he is well worth a pick at pick 11. I think he's well worth it. I would even take him at pick 10 where Josh Allen was too. Just depends on your flavor and what kind of quarterback you like. Also depends on the league you play into. If you play in a league that has 6-point passing touchdowns, then Mahomes might be worth a little bit more. Number 12. All right, and for my 12th ranking, I have Derrick Henry. And let me tell you one thing. Derrick Henry has been getting crapped on. Crapped on and a lot of the rankings that I read, Derrick Henry is like a mid-second, early third-round pick, which I think is just crazy. I get all of the concerns. I'm not blind. Like, I understand why people are fading Derrick Henry so much. He's going to be 29 coming into this next season, which is definitely past the age apex for a running back. I get it. But Derrick Henry is not a normal running back. This guy is an absolute beast. And I think the reason why I still have him ranked in round 1 rankings is because of the usage. This team, Tennessee, unless things change from, early off season right now, to, just before the season, if he's still the RB1 on that team, there's a pretty good chance that Derrick Henry is still going to be the focal point of the Titans offense going into 2023. And if that's the case, give me Derrick Henry at the back of the first all day, because he, at this point, at pick number 12, he's going to be one of the only players remaining that is a true superstar player of their team and a true focal point of the offense. At this point, I would have to go look at the list, but I can't even name you another player off the top of my head that would be the unquestioned number 1 player on their team other than Derrick Henry. So, at number 12, I'm absolutely okay with taking Derrick Henry. Let's talk about some of his scoring. 286.3 points for 2022. Honestly, he would have gone over 300 points if he had played in Week 17 against Dallas. If you remember that game, they actually sat him out because it had there was no need to play that game because it didn't affect the standings position at all. So they were waiting for Week 18. So if he would have played Week 17, I mean, he would have probably went over 300 points for the season, which, like I talked about, when you're in that first round, you're looking for players that can go north of 300 points in a season. I think for 2023, I think Derrick Henry can do it again. So looking more at his points, 17.9 points per game, which is excellent for a running back. If we looked at the other running backs that we talked about earlier, McCaffrey was at 18.5, Ekeler was 18.8, and then Saquon was at 16. So 17.9 is actually really, really good for a running back. And if you have a chance to get that late in the draft, I think you could do a lot worse than going with Derrick Henry. Talk about yardage, 121 total yards per game, which is still not as high as his peak, but still excellent. 14 touchdowns. Would have finished over 300 points for the season had he played in Week 17. And then in 2021, he averaged 23 points per game. I put that in there just as a reminder of the kind of skill and talent level that Derrick Henry possesses. I still think he's going to be the focal point of the Titans offense. And if you're at pick 12 and Derrick Henry is there, I wouldn't hesitate. Go ahead and take him at number 12. All right, everybody. So that does it for our round 1 rankings, 1 through 12. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Hope you guys got something out of it. Saw a little bit of my drafting style and a little bit of how I rank players and what I usually look for when I'm going into a new fantasy league or just any fantasy league in general. Type of things I look for, type of ways I build my team, things like that. I hope you got some value out of it. If you enjoy this content, go ahead and like, subscribe if you guys can. Go ahead and follow us on Apple, Spotify, you name it, we're probably there. Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Twitch. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching thanks for watching this video, and be on the lookout. We're gonna have more to come. I'll probably go through round 2 rankings, I think. If not, then we'll go through some player profiles. But we got plenty of stuff. You can check us out, TIYF Podcast. Also, weekly too, we have fantasy podcasts on Wednesday nights. that we do that's all fantasy. We have a Friday night podcast at Sports Talk, which is great content. Cover all sports from NFL, basketball, baseball, football, boxing, you name it. And then on Sundays, we have a baseball fantasy podcast that we do with Paul and Ant. Definitely lots of great content with TIYF. I urge you guys to check us out, and we appreciate you for stopping by. See you in the next video.